With any luck, the bells won't be too distracting here. It will make me sort of do the steady head thing, though. So next to the French Quarter, there's a street called Frenchman Street, and Frenchman Street has some wonderful characteristics about it. One is that it has a large number of jazz clubs. On Saturday nights, most weeks, at 8 o'clock, there's a sort of a worship service. It's $5 cover and 1 drink minimum, only 1 drink. And there's a performer named John Boutet, who is a jazz musician, a jazz singer. And he sings songs about his neighborhood in New Orleans, the Treme, and about his family, his sisters. This is really getting distracting here, but we'll let it sit there. We'll put it here. How about that? His sisters and things like that. But one of his songs doesn't have any story to it. It's pure philosophy. In it he sings, "We are living the eternal now. The past is gone. The future is tomorrow. Are you alive? Can you feel it in your soul? Are you alive?" And then, to drive home the point, the song's chorus is simply the word now, repeated over and over again. Now, 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 now. It's not a new philosophy. Ram Dass wrote a book in the 70s called Remember, Be Here Now. But John Boutet's music is topical and based in New Orleans. And his words speak to now, the post-Katrina reality of New Orleans, Louisiana, which is the subject of today's sermon. Now, I managed to live 50 years without going to Mardi Gras or New Orleans. How many of you have ever been to New Orleans? Wow. Wonderful. That's like half or a little bit more than half. I never went because it always seemed so foreign. The celebration of Fat Tuesday, the day before the Lent began, and Ash Wednesday, seemed kind of absurd. I never really understood Lent anyway. I was Unitarian Universalist, and what did all that have to do with parades? And then there were the stories of wild drunkenness, of wardrobe malfunction, and pickpockets, and murders, and police, and rain. The combination meant that it was not a trip to be taken lightly. Indeed, the Big Easy was not necessarily the Big Safe. So I never prioritized it. I lived in the eternal someday, or maybe never. When Hurricane Katrina struck in 2005, I didn't have cable TV and really didn't notice the nuances of the disaster and the government response. It wasn't until 2006, when I was in seminary in California, that something struck home. It was a note on the interweave email list. I was thinking about Christmas and coming home to New Jersey for a few days, and what presents to buy people, and which friends I really wanted to see. The email was from a minister in Delaware County, PA. Their church had just returned from a week of service in New Orleans. And her idea was that the perfect Christmas gift was working for a week, helping families reclaim their possessions and their lives. She said, once their homes have been cleared of the mold and rubble, these families can plan their futures. A week of throwing things out. What a way to spend Christmas. Or in my case, January. I ended up being present in New Orleans for 2 weeks, rising early, and the group of us tried to make our way to a work site. Now, most of the city had been underwater for a month. and many of the roads were undermined. Storm sewer pipes, big pipes that they put down the middle of a road, at least half of them are usually full of air. The top half is full of air. And these were under 8 feet of water. And what happened was the buoyancy of the concrete sewer pipes pushed up through the road. Sometimes they just buckled the road, and sometimes they made huge sinkholes. We were told to never drive through puddles because they could be sinkholes. Now, it had been 15 months since the storm and 14 months since the water had receded. The city was very slowly recovering. Have any of you been to Ocean City in the winter? It's hand-raising day. Come on, there we go. Okay, very good, very good. Thank you. I live down beach in Ocean City for this winter, and it reminds me a lot of New Orleans because it's a lot of single-family houses, or actually Ocean City tends to be two-family houses. They're all jammed together in their long, thin lots. So it's just row after row of front porches. That's what you see in New Orleans. These days, Ocean City is a ghost town. Most of the houses are empty, and only about 10% of the people are there. The wind blows down empty streets, and that was really obvious last night, actually. Businesses are shuttered, and everyone's waiting for spring. On my first visit to New Orleans, the neighborhoods were empty too. Boarded up houses with spray paint signs saying things like, "Gas is off," or maybe, "Pray for us." Cryptic symbols indicating if any dead bodies had been found there and which National Guard unit had searched the building. It was a ghost town as well, but in New Orleans, there was no assurance that spring would ever come. Even in the Garden District, which had only partially flooded, the wind of the storm had blown down many trees, ruining the St. Charles Avenue streetcar line and making travel in that area just as hazardous as anywhere else. But now, in the evenings, groups who had come to rebuild New Orleans and kept the city alive. They kept the city alive by going out to the clubs, by eating dinner in the restaurant, and by drinking in the bars. Our group from the Unitarian Church went dancing to Zydeco music at a bowling alley one night, and another night we went and did the traditional thing, went to the Café du Monde and had beignets and coffee. I spent several nights alone in the damaged First Unitarian Church of New Orleans, trying to figure out what, why, and how. I didn't return until 2009. By then, both of the Unitarian Universalist congregations were up and running, sort of. They could use an intern, and I needed a ministerial internship job. So we got together and created something for me. I worked in those two churches and one suburban one across the lake, and I learned to love all three of them. It was still good advice to avoid puddles, and there were still many vacant houses, though some of them had been transformed into vacant lots or vacant foundations. Abandoned churches, abandoned schools, abandoned industries. The drive-through daiquiri stands, on the other hand, were in full swing. And so was the French Quarter, with plenty of bars and music and food. As an intern, I had to set goals, preach so many times, give so many classes, study this, do that. But Reverend Melanie of First Church made sure they put in one special goal: attend Mardi Gras. That was kind of cool, because then I had to do it as an assignment. My schedule was cleared out for those weeks in February, and I watched the newspaper for events and I brought my official Mardi Gras guide. By now, the streetcars were back and running on St. Charles Avenue, which is where most of the parades run. And I'd made some friends to sit with, and I'd bought a folding chair. I was all ready. Now, I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. It was a town that had one annual parade. It was put on by a group called the NCA Society, and the local folks, Boy Scouts and Rotarians and American Legion and the Brownies, Cub Scouts, they all took part. And then as an adult here in New Jersey, I marched in fire department parades or municipal parades for the 4th of July. What's interesting is that it seemed that someone owned each holiday. You know, the way the ancient order of Hibernians owns the St. Patrick's Day in New York City. Or the city of Philadelphia owns the Mummers Day Parade, and apparently they sell the right to name it something, for some, I don't know, the Staples Mummers Day Parade or something, I don't know. Anyway, so I kind of expected somebody to own Mardi Gras, but they don't. New Orleans doesn't put on the parades. Instead, they manage them with a set of fairly simple, though rather bizarre laws. One is that parades may not include commercial advertisements or endorsements. The next one is that everyone on a float must wear a costume and a mask. There is a rule that says there is no handing people live animals, including kittens and goldfish. And parades may not have more than 20 floats. Interestingly enough, if you assign a float a letter instead of a number, it doesn't count. And the other big one, parading and partying must stop at 11:59 p.m. on Fat Tuesday on Mardi Gras. There are 50 or so parades between Three Kings Day in January and Ash Wednesday. Each parade is put on by a crew, that's Krewe. It's a social club, which usually gets a parade permit and usually tells the cops which way they're going to go. And then they provide floats and hire bands and horses and marching units. And I think all the high school marching band budget is made by providing bands for different parades. It's really wonderful and a lot of exercise for if you happen to be in high school. There are about 3 weekends of big parades and about 10 days of evening parades. And most of those are for local people. Only the last weekend is really designed for tourists. Some of the parades are called family friendly, and a few are called more suitable for adults. They tend to have pagan themes. There's the crew of Bacchus and the crew of Jupiter, crew of Endymion. But a few of them have an odd sort of religious diversity to them for this Catholic season. It's very strange. There's one called the Crew de Jeux, which could mean the crew of Jews, which it actually is, or crew of play, I think is the French word for another one is the Crew de Michigas, which is the Yiddish word for craziness. They were wonderful. I once caught a golden dreidel from a float in the Crew of Michigas. Go figure. So anyway, this is the way the celebration works. You sit by the road, and a float goes by with masked revelers on it. And they throw things at you. If you yell, "Throw me something, mister," it seems to help, as does simply waving your hand, or the best thing, having a child on your shoulders. Works every time. And it doesn't cost you anything to attend. Sometimes people will fight over a stuffed animal that's thrown or whatever, but the fights tend not to last long. After all, you're getting all this stuff for free. After float number 20 has gone by, you collect your bags of beads and you head home. And then the street sweepers come down St. Charles Avenue in a formation that's worthy of the Blue Angels. It's really fascinating. And the broken spans of beads are scooped up along with the beer cans and cups and hamburger boxes and things like that. Or sometimes you just sit there because there's another parade scheduled for a half hour later. And you can spend the whole day sitting there just enjoying it and catching things. The beads, of course, aren't really worth anything. The stuffed animals are of only passing interest. What's important is the moment. What's important is being there. And yet, when the failed levee system inundated New Orleans, the deepest emotional level for some was not the loss of life, not the loss of livelihood, or the danger of infection from the contaminated water, though I met several people who were dying of infections. It was the loss of Mardi Gras. Floods kill people, floods dislocate people, but could floods kill joy? One local rock band reacted with a song promising, "The parades will ride again. I'll see my family and my friends because this cannot be the end of the avenue," meaning St. Charles Avenue. The song's defiant. The song was resolute. "The marching bands will roll," he says. "I'll find my city in my soul because I plan on growing old on the avenue." And that was where I began to put things together. Why Professor Harris Lacewell was simply wrong about the practicality of abandoning New Orleans. The city is not just physical land or buildings. The city is the souls of the people. It's the rituals of living, not just Mardi Gras or the city's Jazz Fest or carnival balls or the antique streetcars that go down St. Charles Avenue or the absurdly strong alcoholic beverages that you can get in the French Quarter. The city is part of each person. The second year I was there as an intern, after I'd been an intern, I became a resident in a hospital, being a chaplain. I decided I'd ride on a float, and the crew of King Arthur was the crew that I decided to join. It's a sort of a mid-level parade. It's not the real high-end ones like Bacchus and Endymion or Zulu, but in those you really kind of have to get born into the crew in order to be able to ride. But this one was sort of mid-level. It was kind of cool. And I bought $600 worth of beads in the basic throws package. And they came in 10 of these large bags, like I showed you earlier. And then I spent $200 more buying stuff that I like to throw, including little Frisbee-like rings and some stuffed toys and doubloons. And I got on the float ready to throw stuff. And for 3 hours, I simply threw money away. I threw out moon pies and medallions, plastic pearls, and whistles. I threw things to young folks and old folks, black, white, Asian, straight, gay, happy, sad, families and singles, lazy folks sitting in the back, and those jumping up and down next to the float in incredible anticipation. The only thing that mattered was the moment. And there was a bit of planning to make sure I didn't run out of beads before the end. It was a festival of non-sustainability. I spent $1,000 to be there with nothing to show for it afterwards. What made hundreds of revelers who rode on the King Arthur parade do it? What made the riders of the other 49 parades do it? I don't know. But I know what I got out of it. At the end of the day, I might have had 2,000 people smile at me and say something like, "Thank you." It was a carnival of connection. one by one. Connection and the understanding that life exists and that joy exists. With my mask on, nobody knew it was me throwing the beads, or the doubloons or the stuffed dragons. It was just pure love. So when do you experience pure love? When are you part of an interchange that isn't about profit or power or networking or climbing the social ladder? When teams of Unitarian Universalists, Methodists, Catholics, members of the Canadian Auto Workers Union, evangelical Christians, Mormons, and endless numbers of other groups converged on New Orleans, they had no expectation of reward. They had no assurance of status. They came to the city as a simple act of love. They threw money and time and muscle into the act of rebuilding the city. They raised the neighborhoods up without converting a single resident or selling them a Chrysler Town and Country minivan or even leaving a religious tract in their front door. For some, the city was already in their soul. They came to the Gulf Coast to keep that love alive. For others, they discovered their souls amongst the rotting debris. Moments of enlightenment shared in their work group evening debriefing sessions. When do you experience pure love? When are you part of an interchange that isn't about profit or power or networking or climbing the social ladder? And when is this moment an act of love? I'll leave you with a short list of intentions. May our moments here together be moments of freely offered love. May we give and receive. May we share and honor and laugh and cry. May we know safety and may we know challenge. In the words of Louis Armstrong, all I'm saying is, see what a wonderful world it would be if only we would give it a chance. Love, baby, love. That's the secret, yeah. Our closing song is from the Teal Hymnal, number 1024, When the Spirit Says Do. And it's a page turner, 3 pages long.